In the news this week, damning statistics reveal public housing waiting periods almost double for young Western Australians, with commentators labelling it as a political time bomb for Premier Mark McGowan. An exclusive report coming up.
Plus, Perth's 24-year-old artist reaching for the stars. Melissa Clements' painting successfully entered as a finalist for the Archibald Prize. And later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. As the housing and rental crisis continues to grip the country, WAMA News has unearthed exclusive details from the Department of Communities showing public housing waiting lists for young adults aged 18 to 30 years old almost doubled in the past 3 years. Back in January 2020, young people had to wait an average 81 weeks statewide, 89 weeks in Perth and 67 weeks in the regions. Fast forward to the end of January 2023, statewide wait times for 18 to 30-year-olds ballooned to 137 weeks, 140 weeks in Perth and 121 weeks in regional WA. So far this year, we have 5,151 young adults waiting for public housing, and 1,326 of them are priority applications. Make no mistake, these numbers are troubling, and WA's major community support services have plenty to say, particularly on whether we need dedicated public housing stocks and queues for disadvantaged young people. Our reporter Madeline Lombardi has more details. Good evening, Maddie.
Thank you, Ivan. Young adults seeking public housing have now hit a crisis point as new data from the Department of Communities has revealed over 5,000 applicants are on the statewide wait list. As of January 31st, 2023, 5,151 West Australian applicants between 18 and 30 years old waited an average of 137 weeks for a public housing placement, with an average of 140 weeks in the metropolitan area and 121 weeks in regional areas. WAMA News spoke with the WA CEO of Anglicare, Mark Glasson, to learn more about what the figures could mean for younger people seeking public housing in Western Australia.
Well, younger people typically experience homelessness differently to older adults in our community, in that they don't generally have the means to secure private rental. So
a younger person living tough may couch surf, share rooms with other friends, sleep in cars or live out rough on the streets.
So for a young person to be able to engage in the private rental market, it's a real challenge. So there are less options available for them. What we know from our work on the rental affordability snapshot is that the private rental market doesn't reach those most in need. It can't get there. And so for young people with limited means, it's even more out of reach for them.
A steady rise in housing needs has been on an upwards trajectory for many years now, and within the last 3 years, figures for wait times on public housing have almost doubled. Mark's work with Anglicare provides to address the needs of those people who are struggling to receive accommodation.
We have a housing system that is no longer able to meet the needs of our community. Young people are especially disadvantaged in that. So we commit a lot of resource. We donate a lot of our own reserves. We raise money. Our philanthropy team focuses on youth accommodation and youth homelessness.
According to the most recent Global Wealth report by Credit Suisse, Western Australia is one of the richest states in the world and within the highest median income earnings of any country. So why does WA struggle to allocate its resources?
Yeah, it's pretty damning actually. I mean, the fact that it's gone up since 2020, where the wait list for 18 to 30-year-olds was, I think, 89 weeks, and now in 2023 we're talking about 140 weeks, which is an incredible time frame for a young person, 18 to 30, to try and be on the public housing wait list. This is, I guess, a failure of past governments not planning for the future, and I think we're reaping the consequences as a result of no decisions being made, no investments, no future planning for this sort of need. Homelessness and housing has been an issue for forever, for a long, long time. And the fact that consecutive governments have just ignored that has led us to where we are now. Now, I kind of feel sorry in some ways for the current government because they've inherited a lot of this, and I know that the Minister Carey has been trying and he's been out there spot purchasing properties and doing all that he can. But at this point in time, with the building market, the lack of availability, lack of land supplies, building materials, all of those sorts of things, this is an issue that's not going to go away in the short term.
And we need to address this job seeker issue. We need to make sure that the state provides rent relief for people that are doing it tough, because what we know is if you lose your accommodation right now, you are in a world of pain. You're joining a queue of 80 or 90 people for every available property, whether you can afford it or not.
I'll be back with you later for Western Perspective on the program. Back to you, Melly.
Madeline Lombardi with that report. Thanks, Maddie. As you have heard, the numbers of public housing are overwhelming for the next generation. So what should be done about it? Here for reaction is the opposition's housing spokesman and Liberal MLC, Steve Martin. Steve, thanks for joining us. What's your take on the numbers?
Well, it's devastating news for people on the social housing wait list and for people trying to put a roof over their head. It's more bad news, and the bad news just keeps coming for people trying to find a rental property in Western Australia. So the numbers for young people in particular have exploded since this minister's been the housing minister. Since John Carey has taken on the role, the wait list has gone through the roof, and the time on the wait list has gone through the roof. So it is really devastating news.
When you look at these figures, does it make it harder for you to sleep at night?
It is tough out there, and we've known that for some time, and the numbers keep getting worse. We've seen in the private rental space, the vacancy rates are very, very low. It's almost impossible to get a private rental if you're looking for somewhere affordable to rent. The social housing wait list continues to grow. They haven't been able to build them or buy them to add to the social housing stock. They still haven't caught up to where they were 6 years ago with the number of social homes in this state. And the figures you've unearthed tell us what it's like to be a young person waiting to access social housing in Western Australia. The state government are about to announce another massive budget surplus, and that's not acceptable in a state as wealthy as we are to have this sort of blowout in the numbers you've uncovered.
What's your call to Premier McGowan, given the numbers won't be going down anytime soon?
Unfortunately, any enormous increase of the build of social homes is going to take a long time. I think they need to look more short to medium term and get some of those poorly maintained properties back to the market. They probably need to do a bit of a review of whether there are in fact one person in 4-bedroom homes. We keep hearing that from people who know what's happening in the social housing market. And the homeless numbers have also gone up. They need to deliver common ground. They've talked about that for years. It is still somehow not on the immediate horizon. So there's certainly some stuff the Premier needs to commit to do and not talk about anymore. No more media releases about common ground. Get it built.
Steve Martin, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Melly.
Meanwhile, Housing Minister John Carey has responded to our report. I've interviewed him a short time ago. More than 5,000 young people are waiting at the moment for public housing. What do you make of the numbers?
Look, first of all, I want to say that we're acutely aware that we have a very tight rental market. This is a result of the global pandemic, where we're seeing huge demand for housing across Australia and the world. And so, first of all, we're trying to do everything we can to boost social housing in Western Australia. We've made record injection money funding to accelerate the delivery of social housing, 3,300 homes added to the system. Now, I want to be clear about the waiting list, that for the majority of those people on the waiting list, they're already housed, so they have a home. But they want a preference for the public housing system. Now, we're acutely aware of that, and so we're throwing everything at it. But for young people who are at a risk of homelessness or potentially rough sleeping, then we do make significant investments. So we're spending around $19 million on 29 services that are targeted towards youth. So youth that are either at risk of homelessness or are rough sleeping. So I want to assure West Australians We get it. We know there's a tough rental market. We're taking it seriously. We understand the consequences, and that's why you're seeing big investment in both social housing and homelessness.
Waiting times grew from around almost 90 weeks to 140 weeks in the city, and regional has just over doubled. Is this acceptable?
Well, the reality is that that is always tied to the rental market. So when we have a relaxed or easier rental market, there are less people on the list, and there's less demand for public housing. That has always been the way. But as I've said, and you have to remember this, that many people on the list have a house, they currently have a roof over their head, but they have a clear preference for social housing. So, whether there's 5 people on a list, I mean, we don't want to see anyone on a waiting list, of course, but we understand that the majority of those people do have housing, but that doesn't mean that we're not throwing everything at it.
Peter Kennedy, who is the very, very respected political journalist and commentator, says that Premier McGowan and your government faces a political time bomb if this is not resolved properly. What do you think of his comment?
Look, it's not my job to get into speculation or what other political commentators say. Sorry, I don't operate that way. For me, our focus is boosting housing supply. That is the answer. And if you look at all the initiatives that we are doing, I don't think anyone can say that we're not using every lever. And we know this, that we need infill, we need density, we need apartments. Because for many young people, that is their choice, that is their preference. Because it's close to public transport, it's easily accessible, it's close to shopping and services. So I make no apologies. We are trying to get more density, more infill to create affordable housing so young people have a real choice.
Last question is that
with public housing becoming a major issue across the country, tonight's confronting figures again emphasise that young people in WA are being left behind.
Political commentator Peter Kennedy says the data shows a potential time bomb for Premier Mark McGowan in a political way. Here's his take on the damning statistics.
Public housing is developing as a major issue for governments across Australia, and obviously these figures showing that the homeless and the applicants for public housing among young people are increasing, not only increasing, but increasing by quite significant amounts. And the figures show that the government is not keeping pace with the demand for affordable housing, and it's particularly important for young people. Because if they're unable to get affordable housing in their 20s, then what chance have they got as time goes on, as they get older, as they have families? The situation is only going to get worse. So this could develop into a huge problem for Mark McGowan and his government if they don't get on top of it. And one reason why it might be difficult for them to get on top of it is the demand in the housing sector. The cost of housing has gone up as a result, or the cost of building houses has gone up as a result of the increased demand, and that is associated with the population growth of the state. It's also associated with the number of students, tertiary students from elsewhere, overseas particularly, who are coming into the state. They're being attracted into the state by the government to build the numbers at the universities. So it's a double-edged sword here. The increased number of people coming into the state for universities and education training, that's a plus, but the pressure is putting on accommodation, and this includes public housing for those people who are finding it tough. It could develop unless the government gets on top of it, and they've got a state budget coming up within 2 weeks, unless they get on top of it with a big investment of taxpayers' money to build up the public housing program. It's a challenge for Mark McGowan and his government. They've got to get on top of it, otherwise the situation will only get worse. Peter Kennedy, WAMN News.
Hi there. Are you looking for a new home or want to refinance your car mortgage to get a better rate? At AA Finance Solutions, we have the expertise and knowledge to help you to find the right loan for your needs and budgets. Contact us today. Let us help you to make your home ownership dream a reality.
AA Finance Solutions, your local mortgage broker.
The WA government has announced a major increase in WA's mental health with a boost of $420 million in next week's state budget. This new funding will increase the government's overall mental health investment to $1.4 billion in the 2023 to 2024 financial year, an increase of 57.3% since the government came to power in 2017. The new investment will include a $218.9 million Stage 1 to reconfiguration and forensic task force project to modernise treatment for Greyland Hospital's mental health patients. 53 new forensic mental health beds will also be built. 5 of them will be allocated to the Children and Adolescent Unit. There will also be a funding boost of $201 million to mental health services, $35 million for kids, infants and teenagers mental health services, and 43 new staff.
Northern Territory Senator Jacinta Price officially launches the No to the Voice campaign in Perth, claiming that First Nations people will not be better off under the proposed constitutional change. Senator Price was joined by the Pastorals and Grazers Association WA President Tony Seabrook, along with hundreds of supporters backing the No campaign. During a presentation, the campaign spokesman emphasised to supporters that they need to target the soft yes voters. They also revealed that the No campaign will need to focus on Western Australia, Queensland, South Australia and Tasmania, as New South Wales and Victoria are leaning towards a yes vote result. The No campaign estimates they will need 7,000 booths and 70,000 volunteer hours to cover Election Day, 1,300 pre-poll stations with 82,000 volunteer hours, targeting 65% battleground states with around 4.5 million voters.
It's the end of an era for Perth's rail and transport as the public farewell Bayswater Bridge with a community event this weekend. A community party was held this morning by the state government, with hundreds of residents enjoying face painting, sausage sizzles and other community performances to farewell the bridge. The Bayswater Bridge has been a constant source of internet amusement as it was constantly hit by overhyped trucks due to its low height. The new railway bridge is equipped to solve the problem with increased base height, and it's built to carry the Midland Line, the Airport Line and the Ellenbrook Rail Line. On the other hand, the Midland Line railway service returns this coming week.
Meanwhile, in other community news, the multicultural Eid Carnival hosted by the Australian Arab Association went ahead today. Hundreds and hundreds of citizens gathered at Birchwood Park to enjoy rides, camel rides, multicultural performances, food and other various stalls. The event was hosted following Ramadan and the association is positive over the turnout numbers.
I think it's a very successful day. From the get-go, we had just people coming before we even opened up, which was actually really surprising and really good for us today. So as every hour goes on, we get more people just rocking up, so it's really, really good. Based on our last performance, everyone's reactions to those, they seem to enjoy and become very active with those performances. It's something different, and it's just about bringing everyone together, no matter what culture and traditions that they do have. So definitely I think everyone will enjoy those performances. So hopefully in the next few events we'll have some extra things for them as well.
And now here's AMA WA spokesman Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly medical and news commentary.
Hi, there's been a bit of a focus on long COVID in the last couple of weeks with the Federal Parliamentary Report on long COVID and reinfection coming out, and a strong statement from the World Health Organisation that 1 in 10 infections go on to cause long-term symptoms. And there's good reason for this, as we know from work done around the world, and including at Murdoch University by Professor Jeremy Nicholson, a local hero, who's pointed out the effect of this virus on multiple organ systems. So infection and reinfection is not to be taken lightly. It's causing a problem already for our economy with a reduction in the workforce available. And we're seeing that having effect in all sorts of places around the world at the moment. Italy has just reintroduced a mask mandate into its healthcare services, which is enforcing now. And we need to do the same here. Vulnerable people need to be able to go to hospitals and have their chemotherapy or have their operation and have staff in there who are preventing the spread of the disease. This all comes from the leadership. The staff themselves are not responsible for the standards that are set, and we do need our infection control people to step forward and say it's not good enough for any person to come into a facility and get a dangerous disease that they didn't have on their way in the door. There's a lot of hope ahead, because we know that with simple measures we've been talking about for 3 years now, we can reduce the spread of this disease, and it will be really important in the future to have had as few infections as possible throughout your life. We also need to improve the booster rates. If you're due for a booster, go get it as soon as you can, and we need to be leaning on the government to bring us into line with enlightened places like the United States, where they support vaccination of children under the age of 5. Thanks very much for your time.
And that was Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Well, it's a shame that the Bayswater Bridge is gone, but I'm certain everyone enjoyed the festival and it'll live on in all their memories.
So much memes.
Yes.
Are you gonna miss that?
Almost definitely. It was an iconic part of WA history.
Should have posted more while I still had a chance. Recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Madeline Lombardi with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Melly. Welcome to Western Perspective. I'm Madeline Lombardi. West Australian artist Melissa Clements has been selected as a finalist for the well-renowned Archibald Prize with her self-portrait titled In the Driveway 40 Degrees. WAMN News spoke with Melissa, who is one of 2 West Aussies in the finalist selection, about her Archibald piece, Unravelling Secrets, about her technique and creative process. Not common to see a lot of West Australian artists in the Archibald Prize. How does it feel placing as one of the top 57 finalists?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I think as someone from Western Australia, you know, every year that there's a series of finalists released, it's always exciting to go through and see are there names that I recognise or peers, people that I know, and it's always, if there is, it might be 1 or 2, and the Archibald is so highly represented with artists from over east, so Melbourne, Sydney, Queensland, and so to be a West Australian artist and make it in the prize, it's also surreal, really. Yeah.
Also, not just as a West Australian artist, you're a young artist as well who's quite self-accomplished. Your piece titled In the Driveway 40 Degrees is a self-portrait painted during a Perth summer, which we know in Western Australia can get really hot. Can you explain what feelings were evoked in painting this image in particular?
Yeah, so I think it really reflects this moment of being just so hot and exhausted in an environment that you feel quite alien in. So I had just come back from a trip to the UK actually, which I think the landscape there and the weather there I connect with much more deeply on a ancestral level, I think. So connecting more with colder climates, I think being in Australia, it's always felt very foreign to me, and then that contrast of having just been there and then coming back to a landscape that is so suffocating for people like myself, that's really the emotion that was coming through. I think there's also just that casual, everyday element of that I think a lot of people will relate to, of getting in a hot car and just feeling like the car's going to break, or you know, when you turn you go to put your seatbelt on and it burns your skin because it's so hot. I think that's a very familiar feeling. And I'd been in the studio all day just working on these huge paintings, and it was just, I wanted to capture this small little moment in this tiny little painting that doesn't usually get seen. I think these private moments.
I think that's something that I, you know, when looking at the image as well, was really different from what I've seen your previous pieces look like as well. You're really drawn into the image, and it is a smaller work, which is what I want to highlight as well, compared to some of your other images, which are, or portraiture works, which are on a larger format or on a larger scale in that sense. Was there a specific reason to use a small cotton paper, I believe you used, for this work in particular when submitting it to the Archibald Prize?
Yeah, so I've been working on a series of small paintings on paper since I got back from this trip, and one, it's a really nice way of breaking free of the boundaries and of working on a huge portrait, which most of my works are usually minimum a metre square. So this piece is A6, it's about 10 centimetres by 15, So much, much smaller, which means I can get these portraits done in a much smaller time than the several months that it takes my large works. So one, it was a way of revisiting my usual practice to be able to produce works that I wouldn't usually get to do because they would just take so long, and come at it from a more free-flowing perspective. I also like the small scale of these portraits, this one in particular, because it really forces the viewer to step close and to look close into the picture plane and really examine the subject, which is myself. And it feels like, you know, that subject in the painting has agency and is looking back at the viewer. So the closer they get, the closer they're feeling looked back at as well.
And talking about the whole I guess imagery, or what you've tried to evoke from the viewer in a sense, your work draws the viewer in with your scrutinising gaze, and the more you look at the image, the more detail you can see behind each layer of the portrait. Can you explain what technique you use to achieve the overall mood and feeling of the portrait itself?
So the mood of this really, I think, is conveyed through the sense of warmth and contrast in light in the painting. So in the painting I have this streak of light that cuts over my face, which the kind of overbearing heat of the midsummer day light outside coming through the window. And light for me is a really important element of painting. I think of light as a medium in itself, something that I like to work with to convey emotion and contrast and drama. In particular, though, with this one, not so much related to the light, but the colour and the warmth that comes through. I used a technique called Verdaccio underpainting, and that's something that I've been doing for several years now. So Verdaccio is a green-toned underpainting. It's using 3 colours, yellow, black and white, to make a green value range, and then painting that first, so that at one point this painting was black and white. At one point this painting was green toned, and it looked exactly like it does now, but it was just green. It didn't have any colour to it aside from that. And then I slowly added layers and layers of colour on top and brought out that sense of warmth and light and drama.
I can definitely see that, you know, not having looked at it personally first, but seeing it through the image that's been sent through by the Archibald Prize, you can definitely see the kind of mood and how you've used those elements, as you were just explaining there, to create that overall, I guess, dramaticness and tone of the image as well. Yeah. Now, we know that the Archibald Prize isn't in Western Australia. Will you be travelling to Sydney, New South Wales anytime soon to see the exhibition?
Yes, so the opening night, the prize announcement is next week on Friday, May 6th, I believe, or May 5th. So I'll be going there next week for the opening, which is very exciting. And yeah, can't wait.
So exciting. I know this portrait to the right of you is not your piece, but can you tell us a little bit more about what you're painting and what you're working on at the moment?
Yes, so this is a picture that I've been working on from life, and I do love working from life. I usually work a little bit of a combination of life painting with working from images as well. Obviously, when you're working with portraits, it takes a long time, and getting someone to sit for that entire period can take a really long time. So I don't like to force someone to sit for hours and hours and hours. So I have been doing more sketchy pieces like this. So this is done with 3 sittings over a period of 3 different days, so about 2 hours at a time. So I think this is about 6 hours work. And all of this work on this wall pretty much is painted from life. So this is something that I would like to keep working with and resolving, and hopefully it will get to a level of detail that my work with photography also gets to. But yeah, usually my life sketches and paintings don't really get beyond this more painterly level of detail. So I would like to keep working on this for another few sittings and see how much detail I can get out without having to rely on photography as a reference.
Thank you so much for chatting with us at WAM News, Melissa. We wish you all the best in the following weeks with the Archibald Prize coming up, and all the best.
Thank you.
That was West Australian artist Melissa Clements. You can read our weekly premium stories on the WAMN Extra News Club. supporting independent local news and keeping democracy strong. And now here's Leo Puglisi with what's coming up on 6 News Tonight.
Thanks guys. On 6 News Tasmania, Alba confirmed to be granted the 19th AFL licence after a stadium funding announcement, but it's set to be several years before the side enters the competition. The Greens set to introduce legislation that would freeze rent prices as one of the party senators tells Anthony Albanese to shut up about his childhood story, and 5 people shot dead execution style in the US, including an 8-year-old boy, reportedly over a noise complaint. Watch live right now on our YouTube channel and our website, 6newsau.com. For now, though, it is back to you.
Much, Leo, and that's all from Western Perspective this week. We'll be back with you next Sunday. Until then, Ivan and Melly, it's back to you two.
Thanks, Maddie. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. For details on wamnnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.